Montana Territory, 1875. The wind howled across the rolling plains like a wounded animal, driving needles of rain against the weathered log walls of Fort Benton. Adam Ziegler pulled his hat lower, squinting through the downpour at the distant riverboat struggling against the swollen Missouri. Another wave of eastern greenhorns, he figured, come to find their fortune or their grave in Montana's unforgiving wilderness. At 25, Adam had already lived several lifetimes on the frontier. Tall and lean from years in the saddle, his sun-bronzed face remained youthful despite the weight in his blue eyes. Those eyes had seen too much death to believe in much beyond survival. The light stubble on his jaw was the only concession to the weeks he'd spent driving cattle, his otherwise clean-cut appearance setting him apart from the rougher elements that frequented the fort. "No man lasts long who counts on anything but himself out here," he muttered, adjusting the worn leather holster at his hip. It wasn't just a saying, it was the hard-learned philosophy that had kept him alive since his family's homestead burned 5 years ago. The frontier had taken everything from him, parents, home, and whatever softness he once possessed. Now he rode for the Diamond T Ranch, moving cattle and minding his business, keeping his heart as empty as the vast Montana sky. Adam's trail boss had sent him to meet the riverboat to arrange passage for supplies they'd need for the upcoming cattle drive. A simple task that should take an hour at most, then back to the trail where he belonged, where things made sense. The wilderness didn't lie, didn't promise what it couldn't deliver. The wilderness just was, and a man knew where he stood. "Ziegler," the voice cut through the drumming rain, "boat's docking. Better get down there if you want first crack at the supplies." Adam nodded to the fort's quartermaster and mounted his dun gelding. As he rode toward the river landing, he couldn't shake a strange feeling, like the weather itself was trying to warn him away. 15 minutes at the dock, then he'd be gone. No complications, no entanglements. That was how a man survived the frontier. He would later remember this as the last simple moment of his life. The Missouri Belle listed dangerously as it approached the dock, fighting the current that threatened to drive it downriver. As Adam dismounted, a commotion broke out on the deck. Above the storm's roar came shouts and the unmistakable crack of a pistol. Another crack followed, and Adam instinctively dropped to one knee, hand moving to his Colt. Passengers scattered across the deck, revealing a large man dragging a struggling woman toward the gangplank. Her honey-blonde hair had come loose from its pins, whipping around her face as she fought against her captor's grip. Even through the rain, Adam could see the terror in her eyes. "Let me go," her voice carried over the storm's fury. "I will not marry you, Mr. Willard." The man yanked her forward, his face contorted with rage. "Your father signed the papers, you belong to me now." Adam hesitated only a moment. Whatever was happening wasn't his business. He had supplies to arrange, a job to do, a life of solitude to maintain. Getting involved with other people's troubles was precisely how a man ended up dead on the frontier. But then the woman locked eyes with him across the distance, just for a moment, and something in Adam shifted like tectonic plates beneath the earth. The next moments passed in a blur. The man dragged his captive down the gangplank, a pistol now pressed against her ribs. Adam stepped forward, positioning himself directly in their path. "The lady doesn't seem eager for your company," he said, his voice level despite the thunder of his pulse. The man, Willard, sneered. "This is none of your concern, cowboy. This is my fiancée, and she's having a fit of nerves. Now step aside." "I am not his fiancée," the woman declared, her voice surprisingly steady despite the rain plastering her emerald traveling dress to her trembling form. "He purchased a marriage contract from my father without my knowledge or consent." Willard's grip tightened. "Olivia, darling, you're embarrassing yourself. Your father assured me you'd come around." "Let her go," Adam said, hand hovering near his holster. "Whatever arrangement you had with her father doesn't matter if the lady doesn't consent." Willard's face darkened. "I paid good money for this contract. She's coming with me to Helena where we'll be married proper. Now mind your own affairs, cowhand, or I'll put a hole in you." The pistol swung toward Adam, and instinct took over. His hand moved in the fluid motion that had saved his life more than once. Before Willard could squeeze his trigger, Adam's Colt was out and barking fire. The bullet struck Willard's shoulder, spinning him backward. The woman, Olivia, broke free as her captor stumbled. What happened next shocked Adam more than his own intervention. Instead of running for safety, Olivia Greenwood, as he would later learn was her full name, snatched up Willard's dropped pistol and aimed it at the wounded man with surprising steadiness for a woman of just 22 years. "I would sooner die than be your wife," she declared, her blue eyes fierce despite the rain streaming down her face. "Touch me again and I'll finish what this gentleman started." Adam had never seen anything like it. Eastern ladies in his limited experience were delicate creatures who swooned at the sight of blood, but this one stood her ground like she'd been born with a gun in her hand. Willard, clutching his bleeding shoulder, backed away. "This isn't over," he snarled. "I'll have the law on you both." Only then did Adam realize the full implications of what he'd done. He'd shot a man, possibly a wealthy man with connections, in front of 20 witnesses. Over a woman he didn't know in a quarrel that wasn't his concern, the very entanglement he'd spent years avoiding. "Are you all right, miss?" he asked, suddenly aware of how the rain had soaked them both to the skin. She lowered the pistol, her composure cracking just enough to reveal the fear beneath. "Thanks to you, I believe I am. My name is Olivia Greenwood, and you are my unexpected savior, Mr. Ziegler." Adam Ziegler, he took his hat off briefly, a courtesy that seemed absurd given the circumstances. "We should get you somewhere dry while we figure out what to do about your situation." "My situation," she repeated with a brittle laugh. "Yes, I suppose that's one way to describe being sold like cattle by one's own father." Adam glanced toward the fort, calculating. Willard would likely be heading for the doctor and then the law. This wasn't his problem. He had supplies to arrange, a job waiting, a life constructed precisely to avoid complications like beautiful women with troubled pasts. "I've nowhere to go," Olivia continued, seeming to read his thoughts. "Mr. Willard made certain of that. My luggage, my money, everything is still aboard the riverboat. The sensible thing would be to escort her to the fort, perhaps find a respectable woman to look after her, and be on his way." That was what survival on the frontier demanded, looking after oneself first. Yet as he stood in the driving rain, watching this woman straighten her shoulders despite everything, Adam made a decision that defied every lesson the frontier had taught him. "I'm riding for Diamond T Ranch," he heard himself say. "The cook's wife might have worked for you there, at least until you decide what's next." Relief and wariness battled in her eyes. "Why would you help me further, Mr. Ziegler? You've already risked enough on my behalf." It was a fair question, one Adam couldn't fully answer even to himself. "Let's just say I recognize someone who needs a fair chance." Within the hour, they'd retrieved her belongings and were riding double on Adam's gelding, heading south away from Fort Benton. Olivia sat before him in the saddle, her back rigid against his chest. Adam kept a respectful distance as much as possible, but each hoofbeat seemed to hammer a single truth into his consciousness. His carefully constructed solitude had just been shattered by 22-year-old Olivia Greenwood with honey-blonde hair and eyes that reminded him of Montana's summer sky. "I'm just seeing her safely to the ranch," he told himself as they rode through the lessening rain. "Just saving her life, nothing more." The storm had moved eastward by the time they reached Diamond T Ranch 2 days later. The journey had been largely silent, with Adam conscious of every brush of Olivia's skirts against his legs, every time the horse's movement pressed her back against his chest. He'd learned only the bare outlines of her story. Her father, a failing merchant in Boston, had essentially sold her to Willard, a wealthy mine owner 30 years her senior, to cover his debts. "I only discovered the arrangement the day we departed," she explained during their first night's camp. "Father claimed it was a blessing, that I should be grateful for such an advantageous match." "And you weren't," Adam observed, tending the small fire he'd built beneath a rocky overhang. Olivia's laugh held no humor. "Mr. Willard has buried 2 wives already. The gossip in Boston says the first died under questionable circumstances. The second allegedly fell down a staircase." She shivered despite the fire's warmth. "I decided on the riverboat that I would rather face the wilderness alone than share his house for even one night." "The wilderness isn't kind to those who don't respect it," Adam said, more harshly than he intended. "Women alone don't survive long out here." "And yet," she countered, her eyes reflecting the dancing flames, "I suspect the wilderness is more honest than the society I left behind. At least here, danger shows its face plainly." Her words lingered with Adam through the night as he kept watch, studying her sleeping form in the firelight. There was something unexpected about Olivia Greenwood, a core of steel beneath the refined exterior. She didn't belong in this harsh country, and yet she faced it without complaint. It reminded him uncomfortably of another determined face, his mother's, before the frontier claimed her. The ranch's main house appeared on the horizon late the following afternoon, a substantial two-story structure surrounded by bunkhouses, barns, and corrals. As they approached, Adam felt Olivia stiffen against him. "What will you tell them about me?" she asked quietly. "The truth," he replied, "that you needed help and I offered it." She turned slightly, studying his profile. "Will they believe that's all there is to it?" Adam's jaw tightened. She'd hit upon the very question he'd been avoiding. Men didn't bring women to ranches without intentions, not in this territory. His reputation for keeping to himself would be shattered the moment they rode in. "It doesn't matter what they believe," he finally answered. "What matters is giving you a safe place until you can decide your next steps." The ranch owner's wife, Martha Thompson, took one look at Olivia's travel-worn appearance and immediately took charge, whisking her away to the main house with promises of hot water and clean clothes. Adam found himself facing his trail boss, Charlie Dawson, a grizzled veteran of 3 frontier wars who could read men better than most could read books. "Thought you were just getting supplies," Charlie observed, leaning against the corral fence. "Came back with something else entirely." Adam busied himself unsaddling his gelding. She was in trouble. "What was I supposed to do, leave her to a forced marriage?" Most men would have walked away after the shooting, not brought her home like a stray pup. Charlie studied him with narrowed eyes. "Known you 4 years, Ziegler, and never seen you look twice at any woman, much less risk your neck for one." "It's not like that," Adam insisted, though the words felt hollow even to his own ears. "Once she's settled, I'll be heading out with the herd as planned. End of story." Charlie's weathered face creased in a knowing smile. "We'll see about that. Women have a way of changing the best-laid plans." That night, after dinner during which Adam was acutely aware of Olivia seated across from him in a borrowed dress, he retreated to his bunk in the cowboy's quarters. He needed to focus on the upcoming cattle drive, not on the way Olivia's eyes had lit up when she thanked him again for his help, or how naturally she'd fit into conversation with the ranch hands, or the gentle curve of her smile when Mrs. Thompson mentioned needing help with the account books. Just saving her life, he reminded himself as he stared at the rough-hewn ceiling, nothing more. But as sleep finally claimed him, Adam Ziegler couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that in trying to save Olivia Greenwood's life, he might have fundamentally altered his own. The Diamond T's spring cattle drive was set to begin in 3 days. Adam threw himself into preparations, finding excuses to stay away from the main house where Olivia had quickly made herself useful to Martha Thompson. He told himself it was for the best. The less he saw of her, the sooner he could return to the simplicity of life before she'd entered it. Yet despite his efforts, he found himself watching for glimpses of her across the yard, his attention drawn to her laugh like a compass needle to north. On the second evening, Adam was checking supplies in the tack room when he heard the door open behind him. He turned to find Olivia standing there, a shawl wrapped around her shoulders against the evening chill. "Mrs. Thompson said I might find you here," she said, stepping inside. The lantern light caught the golden highlights in her hair, now neatly arranged in a practical braid. "I've been hoping to speak with you." Adam nodded stiffly, uncomfortable with her presence in this small space. "Is everything all right? Are you being treated well?" "Very well," she assured him. "The Thompsons are extraordinarily kind. Mrs. Thompson has even offered me a position helping with the accounts and correspondence. She says my education will be useful." "That's good news," Adam said, meaning it despite the strange twist in his chest. Her staying at the ranch meant he would see her each time he returned from the range. "You'll be safe here while you decide what you want to do next." Olivia studied him, her head tilted slightly. "That's actually what I wanted to discuss. Mr. Thompson mentioned you'll be leaving with the cattle drive." "Day after tomorrow," he confirmed, returning to his inventory of rope and leather. "We'll be gone about 2 months, driving the herd to the railhead in Cheyenne." "I see." She was quiet for a moment. "I wanted to thank you properly before you left, what you did for me." I've been trying to find the right words, but they all seem inadequate. Adam looked up from his work, caught by the sincerity in her voice. You don't owe me thanks, anyone would have done the same. But they didn't, she said softly. You did. And at considerable risk to yourself. She stepped closer. Mr. Dawson told me about the telegraph that came from Fort Benton. Mr. Willard has sworn out a complaint against you for assault. Adam's jaw tightened. He'd expected as much. Did Thompson tell you that as well? No, I overheard him discussing it with Mr. Dawson. They seem to think the cattle drive is fortuitous timing, that by the time you return, the matter might have blown over. Or Willard might be waiting with the territorial marshal, Adam said grimly. It's happened before, the law siding with money over right. Olivia's expression hardened. I won't let that happen. I'll testify to what really occurred. You saved me from what would have been, she faltered. Well, from something worse than death, I suspect. The vulnerability in her eyes stirred something Adam had thought long buried. He found himself stepping toward her before he could think better of it. Willard won't give up easily, he warned. Men like that don't accept being denied what they believe they're owed. Then we have that in common, Olivia replied, a spark of defiance lighting her face. Because I don't intend to accept being treated as property either. She reached out impulsively, placing her hand on his arm. Please be careful on the drive, Mr. Ziegler. I would hate for my troubles to bring danger to your door. The touch of her hand burned through his shirt sleeve like a brand. Adam had avoided physical contact for so long that this simple gesture felt monumental. More dangerous still was the genuine concern in her eyes, concern for him, a man she barely knew. I can handle myself, he said, his voice rougher than intended. I've survived worse than an angry businessman. Her hand remained on his arm, her eyes searching his face. Have you? I sometimes wonder what made you so determined to stand alone. There's a sadness in you, Mr. Ziegler, that speaks of old wounds. Adam stepped back abruptly, breaking the contact. We all have our reasons for the choices we make, Miss Greenwood. Out here, depending on others is a luxury few can afford. Hurt flickered across her face before she composed herself. I understand. And I apologize if I overstepped. She moved toward the door, pausing with her hand on the latch. I hope the drive goes well, Mr. Ziegler. Perhaps when you return we might speak again as friends. The word hung in the air between them, laden with possibility. Adam knew the sensible answer, the safe answer, was to politely refuse, to maintain the distance that had protected him since losing his family. But looking at Olivia Greenwood in the warm glow of lantern light, he found himself nodding. Perhaps we might, he said quietly. Her smile transformed her face, reaching all the way to her eyes. Then I shall pray for your safe return, Mr. Ziegler. Godspeed. After she left, Adam stood motionless in the tack room, aware that something fundamental had shifted inside him. He'd spent years building walls against precisely this kind of connection, the kind that made a man vulnerable, that gave the cruel frontier another weapon to use against him. And yet, in the space of a few days, Olivia Greenwood had somehow found a crack in those defenses. It doesn't matter, he told himself firmly. 2 months on the trail will put things in perspective. But as he resumed his inventory, Adam Ziegler couldn't quite banish the memory of her hand on his arm, or the way she'd looked at him like he was something more than just a solitary cowboy who'd happened to be in the right place at the right time. The cattle drive began before dawn 2 days later. Adam rode out with 20 other cowboys, driving 1,500 head of cattle southeast toward Wyoming territory. He deliberately avoided looking back at the ranch buildings, though he knew Olivia had risen early to see them off, standing beside Martha Thompson on the porch. The familiar routine of the drive should have been a relief, clear duties, straightforward challenges, no complicated emotions or entanglements. But as the days stretched into weeks, Adam found his thoughts continually circling back to the woman he'd left behind. At night, when the herd was settled and the other men shared stories around the campfire, he would find himself staring into the flames, wondering what Olivia was doing, whether she was adapting to ranch life, if she felt safe. Earth to Ziegler, Charlie Dawson said one evening, interrupting Adam's reverie. You planning to stare that fire to death? Adam blinked, becoming aware of the conversations that had died around him. Several of the men were watching him with knowing grins. "Just thinking about the river crossing tomorrow," he lied. "Sure you are," said Jenkins, one of the younger hands, "and I reckon that crossing has honey-colored hair and the prettiest blue eyes in the territory." The men laughed, and Adam felt heat rise in his face that had nothing to do with the campfire. "Miss Greenwood has nothing to do with anything," he said stiffly. "I was just doing the decent thing." The decent thing would have been helping her find passage east, not bringing her home to the ranch, Charlie observed. "Admit it, Ziegler, something about that girl got under your skin." Adam stood abruptly. "I'm turning in, I've got first watch." As he walked away, the men's laughter followed him. Adam knew they meant no harm. Cowboys on a drive would seize any opportunity for amusement, but their teasing struck too close to a truth he wasn't ready to acknowledge. He'd spent years convincing himself that loneliness was simply the price of survival on the frontier, that emotional attachments were luxuries as dangerous as they were impractical. Yet now, 1,000 miles from nowhere, with nothing but stars overhead and sleeping cattle around him, Adam couldn't deny that Olivia Greenwood had awakened something he'd thought permanently extinguished. The question was what to do about it, especially when returning to the Diamond T might mean facing not only his growing feelings, but also the legal consequences of his actions at Fort Benton. The drive reached Cheyenne after 7 weeks of hard travel. The cattle were delivered to the railhead, payment was received, and the men enjoyed 2 days of civilization before beginning the long journey home. Adam had half expected to find a marshal waiting with a warrant for his arrest, but if Willard had pursued the matter this far, there was no sign of it. It was during their second night in Cheyenne that everything changed. Adam was in the hotel lobby having just finished writing a letter to Thompson reporting on the drive's success when a man in a business suit approached him. "Mr. Ziegler," the stranger extended his hand, "my name is Elliot Powell. I represent certain business interests in Helena. Might I have a word?" Wary but curious, Adam followed Powell to a quiet corner of the lobby. The man's manner was cordial, but there was something calculating in his eyes that put Adam instantly on guard. "I'll come straight to the point," Powell said once they were seated. "My client, Mr. Roland Willard, has a proposition for you concerning the unfortunate incident at Fort Benton." Adam's muscles tensed. "I'm listening." "Mr. Willard is prepared to drop all charges against you, which, I should note, could result in significant prison time given your history with firearms." Powell's smile didn't reach his eyes. "In exchange, he simply requests information on the current whereabouts of Miss Olivia Greenwood." "Why does he want to know?" Adam asked, though he already knew the answer. Powell spread his hands. "Miss Greenwood remains, legally speaking, promised to Mr. Willard through a binding contract with her father. My client merely wishes to fulfill his obligations." "You mean force her into marriage against her will," Adam said flatly. "I mean honor a legal agreement between gentlemen," Powell corrected, his voice hardening slightly. "Consider your position carefully, Mr. Ziegler. The territorial courts take a dim view of cowboys who shoot respected businessmen. Your previous record won't help matters." Adam's mind raced. The previous record had to be a reference to the shooting 3 years ago in Deadwood, a clear case of self-defense that had nevertheless followed him across 2 territories. "And if I refuse?" Powell sighed as if disappointed by Adam's predictable response. "Then Mr. Willard will be forced to pursue the full extent of the law. I understand the Diamond T is a reputable operation. It would be unfortunate if its reputation were tarnished by harboring a fugitive." The threat to the Thompsons, good people who had taken both him and Olivia in without question, made Adam's blood boil. But he kept his expression neutral, years of poker games serving him well. "I need time to think about it," he said finally. Powell nodded, producing a business card. "We're staying at the Cheyenne Hotel through tomorrow evening." "I trust you'll make the sensible decision, Mr. Ziegler." After Powell departed, Adam sat motionless, the business card clutched in his hand. The choice before him seemed impossible. Betray Olivia to save himself and potentially protect the Diamond T, or refuse and face consequences that might affect not just him but everyone who had shown him kindness. There was a third option, of course, one that had served him well in the past. He could simply not return to the Diamond T at all. ride north into Montana territory, find work with another outfit, disappear as he'd done before when trouble arose. It would be the safest path, the one most consistent with the philosophy that had guided him for years. In the West, a man survived by avoiding attachments and entanglements. But as Adam considered this course of action, he was struck by how hollow it suddenly seemed. The thought of never seeing Olivia again, never knowing if she was safe, never hearing her laugh or witnessing the determination in her eyes, created a pain he hadn't experienced since watching his family's homestead burn. With sudden clarity, Adam realized that the real threat wasn't Willard or the law or even the dangerous frontier itself. It was the possibility of returning to the empty existence he'd been living before Olivia Greenwood stumbled into his life, an existence he'd mistaken for safety when it was really just slow death. Dawn was breaking when Adam Ziegler made his decision. He roused Charlie Dawson from sleep with an urgency the trail boss had never seen in him before. "I need the fastest horse we've got," Adam said, already packing his few belongings. "And I need to ride ahead of the group." Charlie rubbed sleep from his eyes. "What's lit a fire under you, Ziegler?" "Willard's man found me last night. They know where Miss Greenwood is, or they will soon enough. I need to get back to the ranch before they do." Charlie whistled low. "That's nearly 300 miles, son. Even pushing hard, it'll take you a week." "Then I better get started," Adam said grimly. "And Charlie, if I'm not at the ranch when you get there, tell Thompson the truth. All of it. He'll need to be prepared." Charlie studied him for a long moment. "You sure about this? You could be riding into a noose." Adam buckled on his gun belt, checking the Colt's load with practiced efficiency. "For the first time in years, I'm sure about something." 3 hours later, Adam was riding north on the best horse the remuda could provide, pushing the animal as hard as he dared. The familiar landscape blurred past as he focused on a single thought that drove him forward through exhaustion, hunger, and the ever-present danger of the trail. Olivia wasn't just someone he'd saved anymore. She was someone worth saving himself for. The journey back to Diamond T Ranch was a grueling test of endurance. Adam rode from first light until well after dark each day, stopping only when absolutely necessary to rest his horse. He avoided settlements where word of a wanted man might have spread, camping rough and surviving on jerky and what game he could quickly shoot. On the 6th day, with the Montana foothills rising before him, disaster struck. His horse, pushed beyond reasonable limits, stepped in a prairie dog hole at full gallop. The animal went down hard, throwing Adam clear but breaking its leg in the process. There was nothing to do but put the suffering creature out of its misery and face the final 70 miles on foot. Adam set out immediately, carrying only his rifle, pistol, and what supplies he could manage. The weight of his decision pressed on him with each step. He had risked everything, his freedom, possibly his life, on the chance that what he felt for Olivia Greenwood was something real, something worth fighting for. And with every mile, that conviction only strengthened. It was midday on the 9th day when Adam crested a rise and saw smoke rising from the Diamond T's chimneys in the distance. Relief flooded through him, quickly followed by renewed urgency. He had made it back, but had he beaten Willard's men? The answer came in the form of 3 riders approaching the ranch from the east. Even at this distance, Adam could make out the businesslike attire that distinguished them from cowboys. His heart sank. They had arrived before him, perhaps only by hours. Ignoring his exhaustion and the pain shooting through his trail-worn body, Adam broke into a run. He couldn't hope to reach the ranch before the riders, but there was another option, a ridge overlooking the approach to the main house. If he could get there in time, he might at least witness what happened and intervene if necessary. By the time Adam reached the vantage point, the 3 men had already dismounted at the ranch house. From his position, he could see Thompson greeting them on the porch, his posture wary but hospitable. Of Olivia, there was no sign. Adam unslung his rifle, checking the load with trembling hands. He had no plan beyond watching and waiting, but the weight of the weapon gave him some sense of control over the unfolding situation. If these men tried to take Olivia by force, he would have something to say about it, even if it meant facing 3 armed adversaries alone. Through his rifle sight, Adam watched as Thompson led the visitors into the house. Minutes stretched into an agonizing half-hour as he waited, torn between rushing down to the ranch and maintaining his position of advantage. Finally, the door opened, and the three men emerged, followed by Olivia herself. Adam's breath caught in his throat. Even at this distance, he could see the rigid set of her shoulders, the way she stood apart from the men. She was speaking, her chin raised in that determined way he remembered so well. Whatever Willard's men had come for, she wasn't going quietly. One of the men moved toward her, his hand reaching inside his coat in a gesture Adam recognized all too well. Without conscious thought, Adam aimed and fired. The shot cracked across the yard, sending the man's hat flying from his head. Horses scattered in panic as everyone on the porch dropped to a crouch. "That's far enough," Adam shouted, chambering another round. "The next one won't miss." For a moment the scene froze in tableau. The three visitors crouched in confusion, Thompson with his hand on his own sidearm, and Olivia staring directly toward Adam's position, recognition dawning on her face. Then everything happened at once. The men on the porch drew their weapons. Thompson pulled Olivia behind a supporting column for protection, and Adam fired again, splintering the wooden railing near the visitors' heads. "I've got clear shots on all three of you," he called, his voice carrying in the clear air. "Put down your guns and back away from Miss Greenwood." For a tense moment, Adam thought they would risk a shootout. Then the apparent leader slowly placed his pistol on the porch floor, motioning for his companions to do the same. "This doesn't concern you, mister," the man shouted. "We're here on legitimate business for Mr. Roland Willard." "Your business with Miss Greenwood is finished," Adam responded, making his way carefully down the slope, rifle still trained on the group. "She's made her choice clear." As he approached the yard, Adam could see Olivia more clearly. She stepped out from behind the column, her face a mixture of shock and something else, something that made his heart stumble in his chest. "Adam," she called, using his first name for the first time. "Is it really you?" "It's me," he confirmed, not taking his eyes off the three men. "Are you all right?" "Yes," she said, her voice steadying. "These men came with papers, legal documents claiming I'm still bound to Mr. Willard. They threatened to involve the territorial courts if I didn't return with them voluntarily." Adam reached the edge of the yard, close enough now to see the fury in the lead man's eyes. "Did they mention that Willard offered to drop charges against me if I told them where to find you?" Olivia's eyes widened. No, they neglected to share that detail. Thompson stepped forward, his hand still near his holster. "Ziegler, what in blazes is going on? These men showed up claiming legal right to take Miss Greenwood, then you appear shooting from the hillside like some kind of avenging angel." "It's a long story, boss," Adam said, not lowering his rifle. "But the short version is that Willard isn't getting Miss Greenwood today or any day, legal papers or not." The lead visitor, whom Adam now recognized as Powell from their meeting in Cheyenne, straightened his jacket with as much dignity as he could muster. "This is outrageous. You're interfering with a legal contract, sir. Mr. Willard will have satisfaction." "Mr. Willard tried to force himself on me," Olivia said clearly, stepping forward to stand beside Adam. Her proximity sent a jolt of awareness through him even in the tense situation. "Any contract made without my consent is worthless, as I believe the territorial governor, a personal friend of Mrs. Thompson's brother, would agree." Powell's confident expression faltered slightly. "You're bluffing." "Perhaps," Thompson interjected, "but are you willing to risk your employer's reputation on that? I understand he has mining interests that depend heavily on government contracts." A long moment passed as Powell weighed his options. Finally, he gestured to his companions. "This isn't over. Mr. Willard doesn't take kindly to being thwarted." "Neither do I," Adam said quietly, the steel in his voice unmistakable. "Tell Willard that Miss Greenwood is under my protection now. If he wants her, he'll have to come through me." The visitors mounted their horses and rode away, frequently glancing back as if expecting pursuit. Only when they had disappeared from sight did Adam finally lower his rifle, the exhaustion of his journey catching up to him all at once. He swayed slightly on his feet. Olivia was beside him instantly, her hand steady on his arm. "You look terrible," she said, concern evident in her voice. "How far have you come?" "From Cheyenne," Adam admitted, suddenly aware of his trail-worn appearance. "Lost my horse yesterday. Had to walk the rest of the way." 300 miles in 9 days, Thompson whistled. That's either the most foolish or the most impressive thing I've ever heard. Adam barely registered the words. All he could focus on was Olivia's hand on his arm, the relief in her eyes, the fact that she was safe, for now at least. "Why did you come back?" she asked softly. "You must have known Willard would pursue the charges against you." Adam looked at her then, really looked at her, taking in the subtle changes since he'd left. Her skin had tanned slightly from ranch work, and her hands showed signs of practical labor. But her eyes were the same, clear blue and direct, seeing through his defenses as no one else had ever managed to do. "I couldn't let them take you," he said simply. "Not without." He faltered, the words he'd rehearsed during his desperate journey suddenly inadequate. How could he explain that somewhere between Fort Benton and now, his entire worldview had shifted, that the solitude he'd clung to for safety now seemed empty compared to the risk of caring for her? "Not without telling you that Adam began again, acutely aware of Thompson's presence and his own exhaustion-addled state. Olivia's eyes softened. "Perhaps this conversation should wait until you've rested, Mr. Ziegler. You've clearly pushed yourself beyond all reasonable limits to get here." Adam nodded, grateful for the reprieve even as part of him feared losing the courage this moment had granted him. "You're right. But Willard's men will be back, possibly with law enforcement. We need to be prepared." Thompson clapped him on the shoulder. "Let's get you inside, son. Food, rest, and then we'll figure out what to do about this mess you've ridden into, or I suppose, the mess you brought back with you from Fort Benton." As they walked toward the house, Olivia remained close to Adam's side, as if afraid he might disappear again. And despite the danger still looming, despite the uncertain future, Adam Ziegler felt something he hadn't experienced in years, the sense that whatever came next, he wouldn't be facing it alone. That feeling, he realized with startling clarity, was worth every mile he'd traveled to return. Adam slept for nearly 20 hours after his return to the Diamond T. He woke disoriented in one of the ranch house's spare rooms, momentarily uncertain whether the events of the previous day had been real or merely the product of exhaustion-induced delirium. Then he saw Olivia sitting in a chair by the window, a book open in her lap, watching over him. The late afternoon sun caught in her honey-blonde hair, creating a halo effect that made his breath catch. "You're awake," she said, closing her book. Mrs. Thompson was beginning to worry. Adam pushed himself up against the headboard, acutely aware of his disheveled state. "How long was I out?" "Nearly a day. You collapsed almost as soon as you got inside yesterday." She rose and poured water from a pitcher on the nightstand. Mr. Thompson said he'd never seen a man so thoroughly spent. As she handed him the glass, their fingers brushed, sending a current of awareness through Adam that had nothing to do with his weakened condition. He drank deeply, using the moment to collect himself. "Willard's men?" he asked when he'd finished. "No sign of them yet." Olivia resumed her seat, smoothing her simple cotton dress, a practical garment worlds away from the fine traveling outfit she'd worn when they first met. Mr. Thompson sent riders to the neighboring ranches to warn them about possible trouble. The hands are taking turns watching the approaches to the property. Adam nodded, relief mingling with the knowledge that this was likely only a temporary reprieve. "And are you all right?" Olivia's expression softened. "I'm better now that you're here." She hesitated, then continued more softly. "You didn't have to come back, Adam. You could have stayed away, stayed safe. Why did you risk everything?" It was the same question she'd asked before he collapsed, the one he'd been unable to properly answer. Now, looking at her in the golden light of late afternoon, the words came more easily. "Because I couldn't bear the thought of you facing Willard alone," he said simply. "Because in all the years I've spent on the frontier, I've never met anyone who made me want to stop running." Color rose in Olivia's cheeks. "Running." Adam looked down at his hands. "After my family's homestead was destroyed, I convinced myself that the only way to survive out here was to avoid attachments. No ties, no responsibilities beyond the job at hand, no one to lose." He met her eyes again. "It was safer that way, or so I thought." And now, her voice was barely above a whisper, "Now I know that kind of safety is just a slow death," Adam admitted. "Meeting you showed me that." Olivia's eyes glistened with unexpected tears. "I thought you regretted helping me, that you saw me as a burden or a complication. when you left with the cattle drive without saying goodbye." "I was a fool," Adam interrupted. "I told myself I was just doing the right thing, just saving your life, but somewhere along the way it became more than that. I just wasn't ready to admit it." She rose from her chair and moved to sit on the edge of the bed, close enough that Adam could detect the faint lavender scent of the soap she used. "And now, are you ready to admit it now?" The vulnerability in her question stripped away Adam's last defenses. "Yes," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I'm ready to admit that I didn't just save your life, Olivia, you saved mine. From emptiness, from the belief that loneliness was the price of survival." He reached for her hand, half expecting her to pull away. Instead, she intertwined her fingers with his, her touch warm and certain. "I've spent these weeks wondering if I'd ever see you again," she confessed. "Mrs. Thompson said cowboys often drift from ranch to ranch, never staying long. I feared you might be that kind." "I was," Adam acknowledged, "until now." The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken possibilities. Then a knock at the door broke the spell. Martha Thompson entered, her practical demeanor softening at the sight of their clasped hands. "Well, now, seems our patient is on the mend," she observed. "Good timing, too. My husband would like a word with both of you in the study when you're presentable, Adam." After Martha withdrew, Adam reluctantly released Olivia's hand and moved to rise. "Whatever Willard's planning next, we need to be ready." Olivia stood as well, her expression serious once more. "I won't let you face this alone, Adam. Whatever comes, we'll meet it together." The simple declaration, "we'll meet it together," resonated through Adam's chest like a church bell. After years of standing alone, the offer of partnership was more precious than gold. It was also, he knew, a promise he needed to protect at all costs. In Thompson's study 30 minutes later, Adam found himself facing a grave situation. Thompson laid out what they'd learned from contacts in Helena. Willard had indeed secured a warrant for Adam's arrest on charges of assault and attempted murder. More concerning, he'd also filed legal papers claiming Olivia as his betrothed, seeking to have her declared a runaway and returned to his custody. "The territorial courts are a mixed bag," Thompson explained, pacing before the fireplace. "Some judges would throw out Willard's claim on Miss Greenwood immediately. Others might give it credence, especially with her father's signature on the contract." "My father has no right to sell me like cattle," Olivia said firmly, seated beside Adam on a leather settee. "Surely the law recognizes that." "The law recognizes money and influence," Adam said grimly, "and Willard has both." Thompson nodded, which brings us to our options. First, Miss Greenwood could return east, perhaps to relatives who might offer protection from both her father and Willard. "I have no such relatives," Olivia replied, "and I won't run. This territory has become my home these past months." Second option, Thompson continued, Ziegler could turn himself in, plead self-defense, and hope for a sympathetic judge. "Meanwhile, Miss Greenwood remains here under our protection." Adam shook his head. "Willard will find a way to get to her while I'm locked up awaiting trial, and self-defense is harder to prove when you shoot a man for grabbing someone's arm." Thompson sighed. "Which leaves the third option, one my wife suggested. It's unorthodox, but it might be the most effective solution to both problems." Adam and Olivia exchanged puzzled glances. "What solution?" Adam asked. Thompson cleared his throat, suddenly uncomfortable. "Marriage. If Miss Greenwood were married to another man, to you, specifically, Willard's claim on her would be invalidated immediately. No court in the territory would honor a prior engagement once vows were exchanged." The word hung in the air like a thunderclap. Adam felt Olivia stiffen beside him, her intake of breath audible in the silence that followed. "And what about the charges against Adam?" she finally asked, her voice remarkably steady. "Harder to pursue if you're both legally wed and you testify the shooting was necessary to prevent your abduction," Thompson replied. "Not impossible, but significantly more challenging for Willard. A respectable married woman's testimony carries considerable weight." Adam found himself unable to speak, the suggestion so unexpected and yet so obvious that it left him reeling. Marriage, the very institution he'd avoided as the ultimate form of vulnerability on the dangerous frontier, now presented as their best protection. "I realize this is irregular," Thompson continued awkwardly. And I'm not suggesting anything improper. Separate quarters would be maintained until, well, until you both decided otherwise. But legally, it would provide the strongest shield against Willard's machinations. When Adam finally found his voice, he turned to Olivia. "This decision is yours," he said quietly. "I won't have you trading one unwanted arrangement for another." Olivia's eyes met his, searching his face for something. Whatever she saw there seemed to give her courage. Would it be unwanted, Adam? Truly. The directness of her question struck him to the core. Would marrying Olivia Greenwood be an unwanted arrangement? The very thought was absurd. In the short time he'd known her, she had become more essential to him than his next breath. Yet the idea of admitting that, of laying his heart so completely bare, terrified him more than facing Willard's hired guns. "No," he finally answered, the word emerging rough with emotion. "It wouldn't be unwanted, not by me. But that doesn't mean it's what you deserve." Olivia's expression softened. "And what do you think I deserve, Adam Ziegler?" "Choice," he said immediately. "Time, a proper courtship, not a rushed wedding born of necessity." A small smile played at the corners of her mouth. "Perhaps, but I've already had more choice with you than I ever would have had in Boston. You've respected my decisions from the moment we met, even when they put you in danger." She took his hand, ignoring Thompson's presence. "If this is to be my choice, then I choose you, not just as protection from Willard, but as the man I wish to build a life with." The simplicity and certainty of her declaration left Adam speechless. Before he could recover, Thompson cleared his throat again. "There's one more consideration," he said gravely. "The judge who serves this district is expected in Helena tomorrow for the monthly court session. If you want this marriage to be legal and binding before Willard can interfere, it would need to happen quickly." "How quickly?" Adam asked, still reeling from Olivia's words. "Tomorrow morning," Thompson replied. "I've taken the liberty of sending a writer to ask if he'd stop here on his way to Helena. Judge Harmon is a fair man and an old friend. He's aware of the situation." Olivia's hand tightened on Adam's. "Tomorrow," she repeated, her voice steady despite the enormity of what they were discussing. "That hardly leaves time for cold feet, does it?" Despite everything, the danger, the rushed circumstances, the uncertainty, Adam found himself laughing. It was a rusty sound, unfamiliar after years of grim solitude, but genuine. "You're sure about this, about me?" "I've never been more certain of anything," Olivia answered simply. "Are you?" Looking into her eyes, Adam found the answer required no thought at all. "Yes," he said, "I am." Thompson nodded, relief evident on his weathered face. "Then it's settled. I'll confirm with Judge Harmon. Martha will want to make preparations, simple as they'll be on such notice." He hesitated. "For what it's worth, I think you two are well matched. Sometimes the strangest circumstances bring together the right people." After Thompson left, Adam and Olivia remained on the settee, hands still joined, the magnitude of their decision settling around them like dust after a storm. "We're really doing this?" Adam said, half question and half statement of wonder. Olivia nodded, a mixture of nervousness and determination in her expression. "We are. Unless you've changed your mind in the last 5 minutes." "Not a chance," he assured her, bringing her hand to his lips in a gesture that felt both foreign and perfectly natural. "But I want you to know something, Olivia. Whatever happens tomorrow, whatever legal protection this marriage provides, it's real to me. You're not just a responsibility I'm accepting. You're—" He faltered, the words tangling in his throat. How could he explain that she had become the center of his world, that the thought of building a life with her filled him with both terror and joy in equal measure? "I know," she said softly, saving him from his own inarticulateness. "I feel the same way, Adam. This may have started as you saving my life, but somewhere along the way, it became about saving each other." The truth of her words resonated through Adam like a physical force. All his life, he had defined strength as self-sufficiency, courage as the ability to stand alone against the frontier's harshness. Now, looking at the woman who would soon be his wife, he understood a deeper truth. Real strength came from the courage to connect, to risk everything for someone else's happiness alongside your own. "Tomorrow then," he said, voice rough with emotion. "Tomorrow we begin again together." Olivia's smile lit her entire face. "Together," she agreed, "come what may." Judge Samuel Harmon arrived at the Diamond T just after dawn the following day. A corpulent man with kindly eyes and a reputation for fairness, he listened gravely as Thompson explained the full circumstances of Adam and Olivia's situation. When the judge requested to speak with each of them privately before performing the ceremony, Adam felt a flicker of concern that the plan might unravel. But when his turn came to speak with Harmon in Thompson's study, the judge's questions were straightforward and perceptive. "You understand, Mr. Ziegler, that I cannot in good conscience perform this ceremony if I believe either party is being coerced," Harmon said, studying Adam over the rims of his spectacles. "I understand completely, Your Honor," Adam replied, "and I can assure you that while the circumstances are unusual, my intentions toward Miss Greenwood are sincere." Harmon nodded slowly. "I believe you. But I must ask, are you marrying her solely to protect her from Willard, or is there more to it than that?" The directness of the question caught Adam off guard. For a moment, he considered offering the easy answer, that of course he was acting primarily as Olivia's protector. But something in the judge's steady gaze demanded honesty. "When I first met Miss Greenwood," Adam began carefully, "I told myself I was just doing what any decent man would do, helping someone in trouble. But that wasn't the whole truth." He took a breath, putting into words what he had barely admitted to himself. "I've spent years believing the only way to survive out here was to avoid attachments, to depend on no one. Meeting her changed that. She made me want more than just survival." A small smile played at the corners of Harmon's mouth. "And what is it you want now, Mr. Ziegler?" "A life with her," Adam answered simply. "Not just as her protector, but as her partner, her husband in every sense of the word." Harmon studied him for a long moment before nodding. "Very well, I believe your intentions are honorable if somewhat expedited by circumstances." He rose, gathering his papers. "I should warn you that this marriage will likely be challenged by Willard. Are you prepared for that fight?" Adam's jaw set in determination. "I've never been more ready for anything in my life, Your Honor." The wedding itself was a simple affair, conducted in the ranch house parlor. Martha Thompson had worked minor miracles overnight, arranging wildflowers in mason jars and preparing a special breakfast to follow the ceremony. The ranch hands stood as witnesses, uncomfortable in their Sunday best but grinning supportively at Adam. When Olivia appeared at the parlor doorway, Adam's heart nearly stopped. She wore a simple dress of pale blue, hastily altered by Martha from one of her own, with wildflowers woven into her honey-blonde hair. But it was the certainty in her eyes as she walked toward him that took his breath away. Despite the rushed circumstances, despite the danger still looming, she moved like a woman walking confidently toward her chosen future. The ceremony was brief, the traditional words exchanged with voices that grew steadier with each promise made. When Judge Harmon pronounced them husband and wife, the small gathering erupted in cheers and applause. Adam leaned down to kiss his bride, tentatively at first, then with growing assurance as Olivia's arms wrapped around his neck. "Mrs. Ziegler," he whispered against her lips when they finally parted. The name sounded right in a way he hadn't expected. Olivia's smile was radiant. "I believe that's the first time I've heard it said aloud." "First of many," Adam promised, suddenly overwhelmed by the reality of what they had done and the future that now stretched before them, full of both promise and uncertainty. The celebration that followed was modest but joyful, with Thompson breaking out his best whiskey and Martha serving a breakfast feast that would have impressed even the finest Boston household. As the morning progressed, Adam found himself constantly drawn back to Olivia's side, as if some invisible thread connected them even across the room. It was mid-afternoon when the lookout posted at the ranch entrance spotted riders approaching, 5 men, led by Roland Willard himself. "They're here," Thompson announced grimly, interrupting the lingering celebration. "Willard and what looks like the territorial marshal with him." Adam moved immediately to Olivia's side, his hand finding hers. "Are you ready for this?" She nodded, her expression resolute. "We knew this was coming, let's face it together." They moved to the porch as a group, Adam and Olivia in front, flanked by Thompson, Martha, Judge Harmon, and several of the ranch hands. Adam noted with grim satisfaction that most of the cowboys had casually positioned themselves near their weapons. Roland Willard was older than Adam had expected, at least 50, with iron-gray hair and the florid complexion of a man accustomed to rich food and expensive liquor. His eyes narrowed as he spotted Olivia standing beside Adam, their hands firmly clasped. "Miss Greenwood," he called as he dismounted. "I've come to escort you back to Helena, where we can clear up this unfortunate misunderstanding." "There is no misunderstanding, Mr. Willard," Olivia replied coolly, "and it's Mrs. Ziegler now." Willard's face darkened with anger. He turned to the official-looking man beside him. "Marshal, I believe you have a warrant for this man's arrest." The marshal, a weathered man with a perpetually tired expression, stepped forward, producing a folded document. "Adam Ziegler. I have a warrant for your arrest on charges of assault and attempted murder against Mr. Roland Willard." Before Adam could respond, Judge Harmon moved to his side. "I believe you'll find those charges no longer applicable, Marshal." "And you are?" the marshal asked, eyeing the judge's formal attire. "Samuel Harmon, Territorial Circuit Judge for this district." Harmon handed over a document of his own. "This is the marriage certificate for Adam and Olivia Ziegler, legally wed by my authority this morning. As Mrs. Ziegler is the alleged victim in this case, and as she has now provided a sworn statement that Mr. Ziegler acted solely to prevent her abduction, the charges are without merit." The marshal frowned, examining both documents. "This complicates matters." "It does nothing of the sort," Willard exploded. "This is clearly a desperate attempt to circumvent justice. The woman was promised to me by legal contract with her father." "A contract rendered null and void by her marriage," Harmon countered calmly. "As you well know, Roland." Willard's face mottled with rage. "This marriage is a sham, they barely know each other." "That's where you're wrong, Mr. Willard," Olivia said, her voice carrying clearly across the yard. "I know Adam Ziegler better than I've ever known anyone. I know he's a man who risked his life for a stranger simply because it was right. I know he rode 300 miles and walked the last 70 to protect me from you. And I know with absolute certainty that I'd rather face whatever challenges life brings at his side than spend one day in your company." A stunned silence followed her declaration. Adam felt a surge of pride and something deeper, a love he had never expected to find on the harsh frontier where survival had always been his only goal. The marshal cleared his throat awkwardly. "Mr. Willard, it appears the lady has made her choice clear, and with a legal marriage performed by Judge Harmon himself, I don't see that your prior claim holds any weight." "This isn't over," Willard snarled, rounding on Adam. "You've made a powerful enemy today, Cowboy. I have interests throughout this territory. You'll find no peace here." Adam stepped forward, placing himself slightly in front of Olivia. "I think you've misunderstood the situation, Mr. Willard. I'm not just some drifting cowhand anymore. I'm a married man with roots in this community and friends willing to stand beside me." He gestured to the ranch hands positioned around the yard. "You're welcome to test that if you'd like, but I don't fancy your odds." For a tense moment, it seemed Willard might order his men to attack regardless of the consequences. Then, with a curse, he turned and stalked back to his horse. "You haven't heard the last from me," he called as he mounted. "Either of you." They watched in silence as Willard and his men rode away, the marshal lingering only long enough to apologize to Judge Harmon for the disturbance before following at a distance. When they had disappeared from sight, Thompson clapped Adam on the shoulder. "Well handled, son, though I suspect Willard wasn't making idle threats." "No," Adam agreed grimly, "he wasn't." He turned to Olivia, concern etching his features. "This isn't the peaceful life I would have chosen for you." To his surprise, Olivia laughed, a bright, fearless sound that seemed to chase away the tension of the confrontation. "Peace was never what I wanted, Adam. I wanted freedom to choose my own path, to build something meaningful." Her hand tightened on his. "I've found that with you." That night, after celebrations resumed and eventually wound down, Adam found himself alone with his wife for the first time. Martha had prepared the foreman's cabin for them, a small but comfortable dwelling a short distance from the main house, affording them privacy while keeping them within the safety of the ranch. Standing in the simple main room, lit only by lantern light, Adam was suddenly aware of the enormity of the step they had taken. This woman before him, now his wife in the eyes of God and the law, had entered his life less than 3 months ago as a stranger in need of rescue. Now she was the center of his world, the foundation of whatever future he might build. "You're very quiet," Olivia observed, moving to light another lamp, "having regrets already." There was a lightness in her tone, but Adam caught the underlying uncertainty. He closed the distance between them, gently taking the lamp from her hands and setting it aside. "No regrets," he said softly. "Only wonder at how completely my life has changed since that day at Fort Benton." Olivia's eyes searched his face. "Changed for the better, I hope." In answer, Adam drew her into his arms, one hand cradling the back of her head as he kissed her with all the emotion he'd been holding back, the fear of losing her, the joy of finding her, the wonder of being chosen by her. When they finally parted, both breathless, Olivia's eyes were shining in the lamplight. "I'll take that as a yes," she whispered. "The best change possible," Adam confirmed. "You should know, though, that I have no idea how to be a husband. My parents died before I learned much from their example." Olivia's hand came to rest against his cheek. "And I have no idea how to be a ranch wife. We'll learn together." Her smile turned mischievous. "Starting tonight." The question sent heat coursing through Adam's veins. He had tried not to think too deeply about this aspect of marriage, not wanting to pressure Olivia given the unusual circumstances of their union. But the invitation in her eyes was unmistakable. "Are you sure?" he asked, needing her certainty. "We could wait, take more time to." Olivia silenced him with another kiss, this one leaving no doubt about her intentions. "Adam Ziegler," she said when they parted, "I may be new to the frontier, but I know my own mind. I chose you not just as protection, not just as a legal shield, but as my husband in every sense. Don't make me wait any longer to discover what that means." Her boldness, the same quality that had first caught his attention on the riverboat, left Adam speechless with admiration and desire. This remarkable woman had crossed a continent, escaped a forced marriage, adapted to life on a cattle ranch, and now stood before him, her heart as open as the Montana sky. "I love you," he said simply, the words emerging without conscious thought. "I think I have from the moment I saw you fighting back on that riverboat deck." Olivia's eyes widened, then softened with emotion. "And I love you, my brave cowboy. Not just for saving me, but for showing me what real partnership can be." As Adam extinguished the lamps and led his wife to the bedroom they would share, he reflected on the strange journey that had brought them to this moment. He had thought he was just saving her life that day in Fort Benton, fulfilling the basic duty any decent man would observe. He couldn't have known he was actually saving himself, from loneliness, from the empty existence he'd mistaken for safety, from a life half-lived in the shadow of past losses. In the months and years that followed, the Zieglers would face many challenges. Willard made good on his threats, using his influence to create obstacles for them throughout the territory. But each challenge only strengthened the bond between Adam and Olivia, forging their hastily made marriage into something unbreakable. When Thompson offered Adam the position of foreman the following spring, they built their own small house on a corner of the Diamond T property. 2 years later, when their first child was born, a daughter with her mother's honey blonde hair and her father's blue eyes, they named her Hope, a testament to what they had found in each other against all odds. And on quiet evenings, when the work was done and the children were asleep, Adam would sometimes look at his wife across their kitchen table and marvel at how completely his understanding of survival had changed. The frontier was still harsh, still dangerous, still unforgiving of weakness or hesitation, but he no longer faced it alone, no longer believed that isolation was the price of endurance. Instead, he had discovered a deeper truth. That love, far from being a luxury the frontier couldn't afford, was in fact the very thing that made the wilderness worth taming. In saving Olivia Greenwood that stormy day in Fort Benton, Adam Ziegler had inadvertently found not just his heart but his home, a place defined not by walls or borders, but by the woman who had taught him that the greatest courage was the courage to love.